Dr. Shawn Powers, and I'm from Austin, Texas. And I've practiced chiropractic for about 26 years. And the most recent miracle I experienced was just last week with my very own father. I was called, he was in intensive care, he was in a coma, and my family was pretty sure he wasn't going to live. And he's 92 years old. He had hip surgery, came out of hip surgery, out of recovery, everything seemed to be fine. And in the middle of the night, he lost his blood pressure, his body just started shutting down, and they weren't able to get him back without assisted breathing and dopamine to get his blood pressure up, and it looked pretty grim. So I flew to Chicago expecting, the worst, and when I got there, it was the worst. My dad was, I have a degree in nursing, and I worked in intensive care before I was a chiropractor, and I know clinically what all those signs are when people are on their way out. And I adjusted my dad, and I prayed that God's will be done, and 24 hours later, my dad was able to tell me that he loved me, and he kept getting better and better, and he's not out of the woods yet, unfortunately, but as soon as I'm done with this conference, I'm going to go home and adjust him again and see what happens. So I believe that it wasn't his time, and there was a subluxation that was interfering with his body's ability to adapt and to heal and recover from the assault of surgery, and the adjustment helped him, as the miracle of life comes true every time when you release that. So that's my favorite story about the miracle of chiropractic right now, because it's a personal relief. And then I would say I have a story about a little baby named Courtney, and unfortunately she had birth trauma, severe birth trauma, to the point that she had 40 seizures a day. And a patient referred her to the practice and said, we know she's brain damaged, but she has 40 seizures a day, and is there anything you can do? And for me, whenever anybody asks, is there anything you can do, I always say yes, because if there's interference in the body and you remove that, even if there's damage, permanent damage, the body can adapt and be better than it is without a subluxation. So started adjusted Courtney, and within probably 2 or 3 weeks, she was down to 7 seizures a day. And it was much less stress for her little body and much less stress for her parents. And so you just never know what a body can do, but you know it will always do better without the interference. And it was much, much better for that baby to be able to sleep and be relaxed instead of having 40 seizures a day. I've got 2 more. These are my favorite stories. I think for me, the miracle of understanding the power of chiropractic came when a man walked into my practice with a coupon, a crumpled up coupon in his hand. And he said, "Can you help me?" And he had a thick foreign accent. And he said he had headaches, and he had headaches since he was a prisoner of war, and he was beat on the back of his head every day in a Nazi war camp. And this man just was, you could see there was literally no light in him. He was in pain. He just was like he wasn't there, but he wanted help. And of course, as he got adjusted and the subluxation was corrected, one day he came in and you could just see the light in him. You could see the life back in him. And he said, he took me, my hands, and he said, "Thank you. I'm better and I'm done." And he left, but he left with life back in him. And then I have one more story that I love to tell. So many times people think about just where their problem is or where their pain is, and they only address that. And when I was young in practice, that's how I thought you were supposed to practice. If somebody has pain, you pay attention to that. Well, I took care of this young man who got hurt playing football. He had a low back injury, and I adjusted his low back, and he recovered from that, and it was fabulous. But he played football for a school for deaf and dumb children. He was deaf and he was dumb. And 6 months later, he came back into the practice with a neck injury. And I started adjusting his neck, and he was told that he'd be deaf his entire life. There was nothing they could do. There was no hearing aids, there was no surgery, he would be deaf. And after maybe 5 or 6 adjustments of his cervical spine, his mother called crying because John heard the phone ring. And that was that, and then there's two miracles about that. Number one, that John could start to hear and hears to this day. And the second miracle was that I became a better chiropractor, and I stopped only treating symptoms, and I took care of the entire spine and looked at how it functioned, not how people felt.
Mm.